So, welcome everyone to the next episode of the Catributor podcast. Today's guest is Aerroon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello and welcome. I'm Aerroon. I have made World of Warships videos for a while, I think. About, let's say, 6 years now. Time flies, I suppose. Time flies.
You also happen to be one of the few CCs I've met in person.
Yeah, definitely. Although I think your hair looks a little different now than it used to.
But still fairly long.
That's true.
And not to mention, you have one of the best nicknames, obviously.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to say, Atem, I really like your name, especially the first two letters. It's just perfection.
Definitely.
It's a real sign of class if your online handle starts with AE.
Yes.
Only the best players.
So,
our first topic is going to be announced balance changes for next patch. So some buffs and nerfs of various ships, including some new ships that have just come out.
I'll have it up on screen right now. I mean, the first is the Julius Merker, who gets better concealment. So does the Schultz. I'm not sure exactly why. Like the one ship that really needs love is the Z31, but I guess they don't care.
I think Wargaming's worried that if Z31 ends up being useful, people might play her, and I think that destroyer in Tier 5 matches is already pretty scary because of the angles and the AP pen. I mean, Tier 5 cruisers have basically no armor, right?
Yeah, potentially, but considering the position of Tier 7 matchmaking at the moment, where you are
that's true.
So, yeah.
And I mean,
Z31 going up against something like an Alaska is not pleasant.
You just have to hope for random torps.
Well, at least the torpedoes are super fast.
Yes, indeed. But at least they nerfed the Lebrecht. Well, maybe that's the approach, right? They'd be like, okay, the Z31 is so bad, we need to nerf the other German destroyer at Tier 7, because otherwise it just overshadows it too much. So they've increased the reload time on the Lebrecht Mass.
Yeah, God forbid somebody actually plays the Lebrecht Mass. I mean, that would be crazy, right?
I weirdly like that, except less these days because of the matchmaking, but the concealment on it is so bad.
I wanted to say, aren't you just better off playing the Z39?
Yes.
Yes.
Pretty much in every way. In fact, that's true compared to the Z31 as well. It doesn't have the spicy AP shells, but yeah.
It gets the Tier 8 concealment upgrade, which means that you're actually stealthy for a Tier 7 DD.
Yes. The other Tier 7 on this list, we're skipping ahead a little bit here, but it's sort of grouped together as the Jervis is actually getting a detectability nerf by 100 meters. So nothing huge, but Jervis has been one of the better ones.
How far did Jervis come down?
100 meters.
Let me check.
No. How good is it right now? Like with everything, with captain scares?
It is 6.3, so it'll go to 6.4, which is not completely terrible, but it's not great.
I mean, let's be honest. It's terrible. It's not terrible at Tier 7, but it's terrible with anything like higher, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Wargaming kind of, especially the older, ships, when they made Tier 7, they didn't seem to account for the fact that Tier 8 gets the concealment upgrade. But I think they nowadays do account for that. Because, I mean, think of the Yukon, for example, right? She has the same concealment as the Monarch, except at Tier 7 without the concealment upgrade. So it's not... Basically, they end up at the same level. If it had been, like, with the old design philosophy, Yukon would have probably been even worse concealment. So I think older ships kind of suffer from that, and I'd really like to see a pass on that, especially DDs.
Oh, I've been saying that for years. Tier 7 destroyers need some love. Like, there's literally Haida and Shiratsuyu have good concealment at Tier 7. Everything else is kind of bad.
It will be interesting
Don't you like having almost 7-kilometer concealment? Especially when you can run into ships like Mogador that have also basically the same concealment.
Yeah, or you just run into 5.4 concealment and get spotted for ages.
Mayhan at least has got decent torp range, even though it's 6.7 concealment. But
now,
Błyskawica, for instance, with its 8 kilometers, and hell, it used to be 7 kilometers on the Błyskawica. Kind of like literally 200 meters of stealth torp capability.
It's okay. I'm still salty with Wargaming over that. Oh, if the Błyskawica isn't as strong as she used to be, we're going to give her adjustments after the stealth fire removal. I'm still waiting.
Yeah, the Masters torps are only just better with 8.5 kilometers. So yeah, and actually, having said they're nerfing Jervis only has a 7-kilometer torpedo range. So that actually is kind of even losing 100 meters concealment is sort of a big deal for the Jervis. In terms of
you see, on the one hand, I like that they revisit older ships and be like, okay, those aren't set in stone, we can adjust them, but it's just so mind-boggling how they're adjusting it. So on the one hand, I like that they are taking a look at older ships again, but on the other hand, what they are doing with them just makes no bloody sense.
Yeah, okay, sometimes it really doesn't.
What are you talking about? Isn't it normal to want to nerf the Leander? She's just so OP, man. It's like she's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I kinda accept that maybe the Fiji was a rather strong ship, but they increased the main battle alert from the Leander, the Fiji, and from the Edinburgh. Why?
Yeah, that's a bit of a hard nerf there, to be honest. I mean, yeah, Fiji's long been seen as being one of the stronger, if not, well, for a while it was the strongest Tier 7 cruiser, but there's probably others that maybe take that crown now. But yeah, Edinburgh getting a nerf is just weird.
Obviously, the nerf actually isn't that big, right? It's 7.7 to 8 seconds. That's like, what, 4%?
Yeah.
5%? But I would say the biggest issue is just the message that it gives out. What's the purpose of it? Like, I don't get it. If we're gonna do nerfs like that, I'd like to see next to it, oh, the Petropavlov's concealment range has been increased by 150 meters or something like that.
But next to it, you see the shores getting buffed. That's what you want.
It would actually be quite nice to see rationale going in with the balance changes, because obviously, as CCs, sometimes we're in a position to ask, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get an answer as to why the changes happen.
I do want to mention one thing, though. I think Fiji is probably one of the best light cruisers at Tier 7, just because basically all the other light cruisers at Tier 7 got really nerfed quite hard some patches ago, right? By the changes to the armor scheme thing, where Tier 7 light cruisers get 25 millimeters of pen, but battleship, bow, stern, etc. is 26. And with the IFHE change, they don't get to pen 32 millimeters either. So, but Tier 8 light cruisers, for example, get 30 millimeters of pen. So they don't suffer from the problem. But obviously that doesn't affect Fiji because she doesn't have HE. Maybe that's why Wargaming found that the Fiji is just doing better. But I don't know about the Edinburgh nerf. That just makes no sense to me.
I'm sure there is a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah, I imagine.
Which probably says something like Edinburgh was played too much rather than it being too strong.
Probably.
Well, I hope it wouldn't come into that territory, because that's exactly the way Gaijin do their balancing in War Thunder, and it irritates me no end. Especially when they balance things in terms of the repair costs and the income. too many people are playing this, so we won't necessarily adjust the parameters of anything. We'll just make it really expensive, which is that's an exceptionally poor way of balancing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. As in that it's a really poor way of doing balance.
So what else on the list? We've actually had quite a welcome buff to the Fen Yang, which is going from 4.9 to 4.7 seconds, which is still a far cry from Akizuki's 3-second reload with the same guns, but it's a step in the right.
It makes a lot of sense though, right? Because
Fen Yang
the
does have
ship
a nice set
isn't
of consumables.
the ship isn't Japanese anymore, so this automatically makes the autoloaders load slower.
I still kind of prefer Fen Yang to the Akizuki, but mainly because it has different consumables and those Pan-Asian smokes.
But it doesn't have like the special 100 pen, right? It has Saki pen, it has long reload, and the torps are only good against battleships, like only work against battleships.
Speaking of the Fen Yang, I was kind of absent for a while from World Warships, and I guess that's when they added the ship. But recently, when I was playing, I think the Schultz or something along those lines, I was playing, and I noticed, wait, the enemy team has a destroyer called Fen Yang. What the hell is that? So I alt-tabbed into Discord and asked some channel, what is that thing? And I was told, oh, it's an Akizuki, but it's bad, and you shouldn't worry about it. So that's how I found out that ship exists.
Yeah,
and,
it's not one you see often.
It didn't seem very good.
It's not particularly. The other buffs we have are Queen Elizabeth is getting a pretty big one. This is probably the biggest overall buff on this page. Is the 72-second turret traverse is going down to 54.5, which I think is that the same as the? Let me just check. I think that might be the same.
That is the same as the Warspite.
Yes.
They decided to apply the same type of lubrication to the turrets.
I mean, the old Warspite, I think, had 72, right?
It did.
But they buffed the Warspite a long time ago, and then they introduced the Queen Elizabeth as the bad version of a Warspite, I guess. So you could upgrade for premium.
For a while, you could at least point at the Warspite's AA and go, actually, that's really good for Tier 6. And then, of course, all the changes happened, and now that doesn't count for anything anymore.
One day, Warspite and Queen Elizabeth are even going to load the same AP shells so that they actually have the same penetration, which right now they don't. The Warspite somehow has higher penetration, even though it says they're the same guns, and I imagine they should load the same ammo, but maybe not.
I don't know, sometimes things are just special and weird, like the Murmansk AP versus the every other Omaha AP.
And didn't it have like 8-kilometer torps while the Omaha had 5.0?
Yes.
Or was that changed at some point?
No, I'm pretty sure it still has 8-kilometer torps.
I mean, it could be worse though.
Well, Marblehead's got like long-range torps, only they do almost no damage.
Yes, Marblehead torpedoes deal 6,233 damage.
It's also, I mean, this isn't on this particular page, but one of the other super test changes that's been noted with the Repulse, which is in testing at the moment. Currently, that's got that same 54.5 second turret traverse, but that's actually going to be buffed to 30 seconds, which will be quite nice. So that will really help set it apart. Quite apart from its speed compared to the Queen Elizabeth and the Warspite. So it's always nice to have responsive turrets on a battleship.
Oh yeah, Baltimore's getting nerfed too.
Yeah, so
radar goes from 30 seconds to 27. Such an enormous nerf. I suppose it'll mean the difference of one salvo, as in you get to shoot your guns one time less.
Yeah, I mean that change, along with a lot of these changes, they are very reflective of wargaming having switched to a more kind of not the big nerf hammer, but the little nerf hammer or the little buff hammer. instead of big changes happening all at once, which overall I prefer. So sometimes changes like these can seem a little silly, but I'd rather they have little changes more frequently than big swinging changes.
Yeah, I mean, if they had more frequent little changes to older ships, I would like it. It's just that with the changes, it seems like a coin flip if they make sense or not. It's a slightly weighted coin, so mostly.
Here's my suggestion to balance the Baltimore. So give her back her old radar. Actually, no, make it better than it is right now. Then give her a heal and move her to tier 9 and delete the abomination we have there right now. I don't understand. Why is that ship a thing? So we're talking about the what is it at tier 9?
I'm just thinking about it. I don't know. Nobody cares because you could be playing in Alaska instead. But it's better than a Seattle.
Buffalo.
The Buffalo.
Yes. It doesn't make any sense. Think about it this way, right? So the Buffalo is such an amazing tier 9 cruiser that they took the Buffalo, same ship itself, right? And then they gave it a smoke screen, and the ship is balanced at tier 8. I don't understand. How does that happen? How is the Buffalo an alright? She just plays differently. It doesn't fit the line.
But honestly, she's still better than a Seattle if you ask me.
I suppose that's true. But then we're talking about a different, I don't know. I feel like the Buffalo it's a different type of ship. You don't play her like you would a Des Moines or a Baltimore. But you do play a Baltimore and Des Moines in roughly the same way.
I think they just wanted you to get in Alaska, although that's no longer available.
I really think Alaska should be available. I think that ship is so powerful that it kind of ruins the game a little bit if you don't give other players access to it.
Yeah, see, Wargaming's philosophy has always been if we just remove it, eventually it will be so rare that nobody cares because it doesn't show up in a spreadsheet anymore. If a ship is played very little, then it doesn't affect the spreadsheet, and if it doesn't affect the spreadsheet, obviously it can't affect the game because the game is like a spreadsheet, you know.
Yes, that's why Gremiash is completely and utterly balanced. But actually, Gremiash is balanced. She's balanced because nobody actually plays tier 5.
Yeah, I play
the only bad thing about Gremiash is that turret traverse.
What do you mean? It doesn't have turret traverse. It's not a stat on the ship. They're welded to the ship. You have to turn the ship.
It's one way of looking at it. So what else have we got on this list? Shores is getting an extra 500 meters of range, which I guess is nice if you play that line, but it would be nice for some of the other tier 7 cruisers to get some extra range as well. And doesn't Shores already get a spotter? I'm sure it does. Yeah, it does.
I have no issues with buffing any of the tier 7 light cruisers. Hell, at this point, I take a buff even to Belfast. I find the tier 7 light cruisers they feel a little lackluster at the moment, like the situation about them. Actually, maybe not even limited to light cruisers. I'd say quite a few of the tier 7 heavy cruisers are a little lacking as well.
Yeah, I mean, the only light cruiser I think I regularly play is the Atlanta. Not because the Atlanta is the strongest ship out there, but the Atlanta is just fun. And I mean, it has this amazing camo.
Yeah, that's true. Particularly fitting.
Yeah,
particularly fitting right now.
Yeah, the only ones I play on a regular basis are the ones that have some kind of decent range to work with, like the Algerie. I think York is pretty decent. Yeah, 17.3. I guess Jaws will kind of.
The York is a light cruiser.
Well, we're talking light and heavy cruisers here, but yeah, I don't know if there's any light cruisers that have a really decent range at this tier. Some cruisers that just have terrible range. I mean, the Weimar that just came out.
Weimar, amazing range
kilometers
with 11.5 kilometer concealment.
Fun fact, I've pointed this out in the Discord, so you guys have probably seen it, but yeah, if you don't take Concealment Expert, but you do take Heavy HE, which gives you plus 15% detectability, you can have a worse surface concealment than your firing range.
there's an Henri build called the Lighthouse build. I guess that would be quite fitting for this ship, huh?
Indeed. So yeah, literally every other cruiser. I mean, we're talking things like the Atlanta, or even the Huang He, or the British light cruisers around this tier. Everything that's got really terrible range at least has a really good concealment to go with it. But Weimar absolutely doesn't. And the thing that's supposed to make up for that is it has a special spotter plane. But
Yeah.
given the reloads isn't super fast, it's what, 8-second reload? It's
No.
not that useful.
See, it's a special spotter plane in the sense that instead of lasting 100 seconds like spotters normally do, it lasts for 60 seconds. Yes, it does get 30% increased range, but I think I'd take the extra 40 seconds of spotter plane rather than the more range.
And it's not even like if they'd given it the same rapid cooldown that you had with the laser, which personally is a spotter plane I would like to see on other ships, but we've only ever had that on the laser, where you have maybe not as fast as the laser as 10 seconds, but still, that could have been something a bit more interesting. But no, it's just a kind of a weird, awkward ship to play.
My suggestion to Wargaming, at least actually I've made it a long time ago already, make a line that's basically where one of the gimmicks, so to say, is that it basically always has a spotter plane up. So it has a different type of aiming system. Because particularly when I want to say when I started the game, but honestly it's like the first 3 years of the game, aiming with the spotter plane was basically impossible for me. I just, sure, I could sometimes hit what I was aiming at, but the aiming seemed way harder than it does regularly. And so when I would need to launch the spotter plane, I'd like to fire my shots, but then if I didn't need it anymore, I'd like to, remove it, but back then you couldn't. By the way, there's actually a mod that does that nowadays. You can just zoom back a little bit. Although maybe the game will have that, or has it, I don't know, as well. But effectively, I'd like to see something like that, because it would be different type of aiming. You could learn how to aim with a spotter plane, and it would also make it so that the line actually cares about whether there's a ship close to it. Because obviously, if you're next to an island and an enemy is on the other side of the island, your spotter plane gets shot down. So it could be an interesting thing there. Speaking of the Weimar, what do you guys think of her? She's basically was released yesterday, right?
Yeah, or maybe we've got 2 more things to mention, and then we'll maybe chat about the Weimar. So, where were we? Monarch is getting a slight buff to its base firing range, 500 meters, same as the Shores. So any buff to the Monarch is welcome, I guess. Still among the worst tier 8 battleships, but yeah. And also, Andrea Doria is getting yet another SAP buff from 9.9k to 10.250, which is a very awkward way of saying it. So, but that obviously maximum SAP damage, so that's going to be for a Citadel hit essentially with your SAP. So the effect for most people won't be that noticeable.
I haven't played the Andrea Doria much.
Well, the fact that they buffed it so soon after it came out was not a surprise, and then it's also not a surprise that they're buffing it yet again. But yeah, so I think that's it.
It's the tier 6 one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
With the 320 mils.
Yeah, that's a little too little.
A nice looking ship, but yeah, you basically from tier 7 upwards with the 15-inch guns, you can the AP is actually pretty decent on those, especially on the tier 7 when you have that that high penetration AP. I mean, obviously that can also be a problem if you're shooting against things and getting lots of overpens, but against angled targets, it's really nice. But with the smaller caliber guns, you have to use the SAP, and it's a kind of a bit painful with the Italian accuracy.
Yeah, and Lepanto gets particularly odd on that one because of the really bad firing angle on the rear turret.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
that line's kind of been a bit of a. Well, I don't think anyone got super excited about those, and there's probably one or two fans out there of the Italian battleships, but probably not that many.
I think initially it seemed like really, really interesting because it's actually fun in the sense that you can play them aggressively, and then you still have a way to get out, right? Because of your smoke
once you
screen.
get to tier 8 and you get the smoke, yeah.
Yeah, but I find that nobody actually plays them like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but I basically never see anybody like rush in, then use their smoke screen to kite outwards. It just doesn't really seem to happen.
I mean, the thing is, obviously, you can't shoot while you are then retreating, so you are only like on your way in, you do damage. And the other thing is, you don't really get rewarded that much for getting close, I feel like, right? You don't really have, other than that your terrible accuracy is slightly less terrible, there aren't really any benefits for getting that close, and you don't have the overmatch of other higher tier battleships, so you can't even like go through a Des Moines nose or something.
What do you mean? Are you saying you don't build your Italian battleships for secondaries?
It would actually have been really interesting if they'd given them something more like the Soviet battleship dispersion curve, where maybe it's still that terrible at long range, but it actually becomes really good at close range. So you could do that kind of hit and run tactic profitably. But no, that's not what we got. We don't get interesting synergies like that most of the time, sadly.
Joking aside, though, I think actually the strategy would work because it doesn't really matter what you're doing once you're retreating. The point is you want the smokescreen while you're turning your ship so you don't get deleted. I mean, that's exactly why you can do it with an Italian battleship. Other ones, it's a bit sketchy. But yeah, I agree. The accuracy just means that it feels like playing dice, basically.
I mean, I've played I tend to play my battleships rather aggressively. I love the Germans, and I play all Germans higher tiers as secondaries. So I have a lot of experience, I guess, with aggressive battleship play. And the thing is that, like, when you're not careful, like when you're pushing in already, you can take a massive amount of damage. And if you don't get a lot out of it, you have to turn away really quickly. If you try that with an Italian, usually when you try to push in, you try to be somewhere where there is islands, where there are ways to disengage, like if you're in a German or something. If you go a little bit more open in Italian, say I can use the smoke screen, chances are you lose half of your health, you get 2 salvos off, and you already have to retreat, and the 2 salvos will miss. And there is no real benefit out of it. It's just that there is often too much long-range damage. The Italians aren't that tanky enough, and as I said, there isn't that much benefit in getting. You don't have any oomph when you get close, right? You probably go in and then do 2k damage to something because you couldn't overmatch it in the way angled, and then you are sad and turn around.
Well, I would say there is actually one benefit, a pretty massive one, but it's not actually from the ship itself. It's the fact that you're going closer, so your teammates tend to not stay quite as far away. It doesn't always happen, but but it's kind of funny, and I'm joking partly, but genuinely, I do mean that quite often I notice that players like to follow other players. So if you do something aggressive, your teammates tend to seem to also be slightly more aggressive. So, but at the same time, when you do the opposite, when you're being really passive, the teammates that would have otherwise followed you are now also following you, but now they're following you in the wrong direction. And it doesn't really matter like what type of ships you're playing. And I think in this sense, maybe it can work, but I'm not entirely certain.
Once you smoke and turn around, they'll probably all flee because you stopped leading the charge. I feel like you can do the same thing a lot better in a German one with a slightly more moderate approach with some islands. And then when there's an opportunity, you just go in, and then you get your secondaries placing, and then you're happy.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, actually, that's exactly how and why I play the Germans. And I actually think that's part of why I tend to have so much success with them. because I'm playing aggressively, and then my teammates stop sitting around at the very back. Hopefully.
I'm with you on that. I guess.
Whereas when I play something like Yamato, I find that quite often, I don't know, the team just kind of falls apart much more easily than I feel otherwise. And I blame it on the fact that I didn't go in.
Yeah, it's true. Like, leading the charge is not often something that shows up on the scoreboard that much, but it's needed, right? Sometimes you just need to push in, even if it costs you a lot of your health, or maybe even your sync. Sometimes just getting your ships moving forward can be a winning move.
Yes, but
The real trick is getting teammates to actually, or enough teammates to actually go with you, and not just sit kilometers behind you watching you get chewed on by the enemy team.
That's true. And I'd like to give all the listeners some advice on this part. So if you do a push like this, right? The most important thing to keep in mind is that when you do the push and you end up dying, you have to blame your teammates.
Very important pro gamer advice there.
Pro gamer move.
Yeah. Right. So Weimar, we're going to talk about Weimar a little bit. So this is probably a good time to do that.
So it's funny when I look at the Weimar on paper, I see a ship I look at it and go, hey, didn't I play this ship like 6 months ago or something? And it was called the München back then. Because it really feels like I played that ship. But when I actually play it, I think it plays differently. The shells are faster, and while both are basically armored with wet paper, I do think Weimar is slightly less likely to be popped by a battleship in one go. Slightly, but it can be a big difference when you're when you're in a slippery ship, right?
It's actually, I think it's a York hull, but the armor is a bit worse. I can't remember how it compares in terms of maneuverability.
I have to admit I haven't played the Weimar. I mean, I look at it, was like, why would I do that?
So, for those who don't know of the listeners, the Weimar is a German light cruiser that has 12 guns. It has all right HE damage output, I think around 150k. It's not great, but you got to remember that because it's German, it gets 38 millimeters of penetration on the HE, whereas all the other tier 7 light cruisers are stuck with like 25. Therefore, you can actually deal damage even when you're up tiered against the battleships with their 32 millimeters of armor. So that's actually pretty amazing. Now, her downside is that she has abysmal range. 14 kilometers is... it's, not enough. She also gets a 15% speed boost, which is kind of funny because even with your speed boost, you're still slower than the München. I don't know why we would get that. Maneuverability-wise, it's about the same. Also, it has 2 sets of torps on each side. So if you do camp it behind an island and there's a battleship coming, that battleship is... Well, it depends. It's going to have a bad time if it doesn't kill you in one salvo, but it can very well just kill you in one salvo. Because it is a light cruiser, it has 30k HP and not much of what you'd call armor.
Definitely not. I mean, it's a 16 millimeter bow as opposed to the 25 millimeters. There we go, on the York.
Yeah, and 25, but the 25 millimeter side and deck, which is actually one of the big advantages over the München. I mean, it might not seem like much, right? 25 millimeter side armor compared to München's 20, but that means the difference between some of the lower tier battleships overmatching it versus not. Like, I think something like Fuso will be able to overmatch the München. Actually, let me see. Yes, it'll overmatch the München's side armor, but not the Weimar's. So, as a Weimar, if you go like slightly diagonally, you're probably gonna be fine for a few salvos. München's probably dead.
Yeah, but München would be farther in the back, so München would have a higher chance of being fine.
That's another point. München actually has more range, something like 16.6.
And
Weimar has
much better concealment.
Oh yeah, a 9.4 kilometer concealment compared to Weimar's 14 kilometer range and the 11.5 conceal.
Which is only slightly better than what York has, except York, again, has much better range.
Yes.
So basically,
I
you
know.
are kind of getting a little bit more armor and but shittier range and shittier concealment.
I mean, it
And
does offer.
it's
I'll give it
spotted.
this. It does offer something different than the München and the Mainz at tier 8, which also has 1,250 mil guns. But that's on a hipper hull, so that's
Yeah,
kind of a
I
different
wanted to
beast,
say,
really.
Mainz at least gets armor.
Yeah. So it's niche. It's kind of a hard ship to recommend. Like, if you want a challenge, then okay, the Weimar is there, but it's definitely not going to be for the casual player, I don't think.
Yes, I'd recommend the Atlanta instead. It's more fun.
Oh yeah. And looks better.
Yes.
So yeah, it's not bad shit, but I like couldn't particularly recommend it to the masses.
I'm not sure I'd call it not bad. I think I lean more towards not.
I mean,
pretty
it's
bad.
definitely not good. It's very, very definitely not good. Maybe
Yes.
maybe I should say not completely terrible.
That's all. Yeah, that sounds more
Let's
like
say
it.
it's better than a Z31.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's not exactly a high bar, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've covered the Weimar, so we could talk about the new coming ship line now, since we've just talked about our love for brawling. I
Yes.
have hopes for the... Well, I mean, on the one hand, I have hopes for the new ships. On the other hand, I'm afraid that Wargaming will somehow screw it up. But they technically, they say, what did they say, right? They wanted as short-range combat due to low concealment, decent secondaries, and small number of main battery guns with low range of fire. So basically, you have shit main guns, but good concealment and good secondaries.
Going to refill my water glass, by the way. Very, very professional doing this midstream.
No
That-
problem.
That actually makes me think of a certain battleship that already exists in the game that I actually kind of like. Actually, I like a lot.
Nice enough.
The Gneisenau, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I think and have always thought that she's one of the best tier 7 battleships because she has armor that allows you to go close.
yeah,
She kind of has the Petropavlovsk effect going on. I didn't in the past. I never really realized why she felt so good, but I think it's because she sits so low in the water and she has the. Well, I want to say icebreaker, but it's not actually an icebreaker. The armor plates at the front.
Oh, what do they call it? Like the Atlantic bow or something?
Yeah,
like that.
Basically, usually, especially the older battleships like Nagato or Colorado, when you meet up against higher tier battleships, almost all of them have guns that overmatch your bow. But and that puts your citadel at risk as well. But when you're in the Gneisenau, you sit fairly low in the water, and your waterline actually has the armor that will bounce battleship shells. So you can really go close with that ship.
Although I have to say I've been hit through the nose quite often in the Gneisenau too. If the enemy knows what they are doing there, your nose is still a problem.
Yes. Well, yes, it's a bit like playing the Stalingrad, I suppose, in that sense.
Oh, also. Well,
I should probably preface talking about these announced ships by saying this was all announced at a presentation at HMS Belfast on last. Oh, was it even this? No, it was this Monday. It was this week.
Oh yeah.
And they invited a bunch of CCs down. This was a joint event between Wargaming and Imperial War Museums, London, and who actually now are responsible for the upkeep of Belfast.
Wait, so let me get this straight. They invited people to an event in the UK to announce World War II era German ships?
Well, it was the event was for the opening of a gaming room sponsored by World Warships on HMS Belfast. So people going to Belfast in future will be able to play I think it's
Belfast?
locked to co-op, so it's like Belfast and Belfast 43, and you can only play co-op games.
That's
So
good.
it's a bit limited, but it's kind of on brand.
No, it's good because I still
Yeah, I mean-
remember when they did Gamescom Tappets.
Yeah, better than having people that have no idea what they're doing, going into high tier ships and
And then leaving
random
10
games.
minutes later.
Yeah. So that was all well and good. They invited a bunch of UK people, and it was all a bit last minute, but that was partly due to uncertainty over COVID restrictions and whatnot. And so that was fair enough. But what they didn't do, and this is me just being a bit grumpy about this, is they neglected to think that maybe people traveling from all over the UK might need some of their travel costs reimbursed, which apparently they didn't put in any budget for at all. So I was unable to afford to go down to London for an afternoon from the Outer Hebrides, sadly. And I know, like the other person that had to travel down from Scotland was Yusril, but he's at least on the mainland, so it was a little bit less of an issue. But he still took the sleeper train from like Perth or somewhere. So
I mean,
yeah,
it
I was a
was
bit
weirdly
like that.
organized.
Yeah, it was.
They
And this was
basically
the piece of it was these ships being announced.
Yeah, they invited people but didn't pay them for expenses and then forbid them to actually record the presentation where they announced the juicy stuff, which meant that there was an actual, like they invited people, but there was no advantage for people to show up. And
Pretty
there was
much.
no, like, they didn't even like.
I think they did have some people that got invited that got reimbursed. I think they had one or two, was it Warships Legends contributors? Something like that. Who apparently were handled by a different PR firm and did get some of their travel costs reimbursed. So we got the cheapskates, apparently. I really want to go and see Belfast as well, and it would have been great to see to meet a bunch of people like TC that I've not met in real life. But no, it'll have to be some other time, sadly.
Wait, have you never been to the Belfast?
No, I've travelled through London precisely twice in my life, and that was going to Tankfest one year, which required changing trains in London.
Don't you live in the United Kingdom on an island in the North Atlantic?
I mean, I know the UK isn't that huge, but I live kind of out of the way. The Outer Hebrides is like the northwest corner of Scotland, and London's all the way down in the south of England. So it's not like the furthest possible journey, but it's still a fair journey. I actually looked up flights because I was doing preparation for planning, and even if I literally flew from the island to, you can fly to either Inverness, Glasgow, or Edinburgh. Even if I did that, with the way the flights match up or don't match up with flights down to London, it still would have been a 3-day trip. So
I'll just say this: you play a game with ships in it. I mean, just build a boat. How hard can it be?
Yeah. How hard can it be?
Hey, I watched I once watched a TV show where they made cars into boats to cross the channel. Can't be harder than that.
I'm sure that'd be perfectly safe. Definitely.
You know, you should get a narrow boat and then just like slowly travel the whole of the UK down there. In a year, you're probably somewhere. If there are these canals in Scotland connected to those in like Britain.
There are bits where you would have to go around the coastline. I don't think
I'm
it's
gonna
that
recommend
connected.
a hovercraft.
I know people have done, like, literally sometimes people will take their canal boats from the English canal system. Like, it's possible to chug over the channel in a canal boat and go on continental canals, but it's probably not recommended. Anyway, we're getting a bit off topic at this point, I suppose.
Slightly. Yeah, we were talking about the Germans that have been announced. Yes. I mean,
it's a historical line up until what, tier 6, tier 7?
I mean, they took World War I ships and then just extended them into an line until tier 10, right?
Yeah, I think tier 8, 9, and 10 are like paper what ifs, but I'm pretty sure this is one of those lines where we can say actually most of them existed, like a majority of them existed. And of course, for those World War One battleship fans, some of the lower tier ones would be nice to see in game, like the Von der Tann and the Derflinger. And of course, Mackensen we already kind of have in game in the form of the Prince Eitel Friedrich, but we don't, I guess, know exactly how close to the Eitel Friedrich it'll be. I imagine it'll have worse range if that's what they're talking about. Eitel Friedrich actually has got a what? Let me bring it up. 17.8 kilometers. So presumably it's going to be shorter range than that.
So I think the tier 8 one looks spectacularly good.
Yes, this is the one that everyone's been laughing at. That looks like a Deutschland class Panzerschiff had a love child with Von der Tann, I guess.
It's a bit weird. It won't win any beauty contest, but like if you take a very large paper bag and you put it over like the tower, you know, it might look
like a destroyer.
Yeah, so, comparisons to the Walt class American destroyers have been made, the modern ones.
No, I mean it has 2 turrets at the back and 1 turret at the front.
Yeah, that's an odd setup. It's also worth pointing out that you can see on the pictures that these all appear to have, well, not all, I don't know if all of them do, but some of them appear to have torpedo launchers.
I mean, they stated that these ships are also armed with long-range torpedoes. Now, that doesn't tell us an awful lot. What does long range mean? How many torpedoes? What will be the firing angles? How fast will they be? Like, will they be like the new German Torps? Will they be old German Torps?
I think when they're talking about long range, I'm sure I saw somewhere in the Discord. I don't know. Well, actually, I should be careful what I say here, but I'm sure I saw somewhere that they will be very similar to the long range, low speed ones on the new destroyers.
I saw that I saw there's a speculation, but I've never saw it.
That would also be my expectation.
I mean, I don't know. They might be interesting. They might be more interesting than the Italian battleships have turned out to be, at least.
I hope so.
I mean, good secondaries definitely gets me interested. The thing is, what I'm also confused about is they never mentioned anything about defense. They say like the German battleships blah short range due to low concealment, decent secondaries, and small number of main guns with low range of fire. So basically, they're saying you'll have not great main guns, but you have good concealment, and you'll have those torps, right? Good concealment helps you get close. That will certainly be an advantage. But in order to brawl, you need the armor to survive that brawl, in a sense, right?
Yeah, you've either got to have really good armor, or you've got to have really good damage soaking ability, i.e., a super heal. And it's kind of maybe not a lot of other possibilities. So it's going to be one of those two things, really.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a super heal, but like low cooldown on then heal, or better cooldown on damage con, or a different damage con. Things like that. Good citadel protection.
What if they make it like the heal in Arms Race?
But it's a ticking heal. I've long wanted to see that kind of, like, I think that would be like for a cruiser line, maybe, or
I actually thought
destroyers.
That. So we saw the thing Arms Race before the Soviet battleships were added. I genuinely thought that they were going to use that for the Soviet battleships. But no, they didn't. I'm guessing they probably thought of it, but found that it was a bit too strong, because that healed like everything.
Yeah, the downside is that, yeah, it does. And also you've then maybe got the problem of players just, I'm going to hide behind an island for 5 minutes while I heal. And you don't necessarily want people to be, you don't want to encourage that necessarily. because people aren't even gonna like. If you're really low health, then okay, you want to keep yourself in the game and get some health back. But people, there are going to be some players that take any kind of damage and are just going to sit behind an island, even if they are still at like 3/4 health to start with. So, yeah. But if you, I don't know, I feel like you could implement that somehow, make it interesting somehow.
I mean, they could like give us the arms race game mode, you know? Wouldn't that
Yes,
be lovely?
I think so too. Yeah, I'd like to see arms race again. Give it. I don't know. I don't even care if they give it to us in ranked or something.
No, it's busy getting submarines and double CVs, but we'll come to that. We'll come to that. The other thing on this page is a surprisingly historically based Tier 10 battlecruiser design for the British with, 20-inch guns?
508 millimeters, whatever that is in inches.
Yeah, I'll just check that. I think it's 20. Yeah, it's exactly 20 inches. HMS Incomparable. Now, this actually came out and this was complete, paper napkin fantasy, but this was Admiral Jackie Fisher himself going, wouldn't it be cool if we had one of these, and commissioning some like initial design studies, but it was basically initial design studies. This thing almost certainly would never have actually been built. So yeah, it's going to have big guns. It looks like it's only got 6 of them. I don't think we know much else about it apart from that. I mean, British battlecruiser means it probably won't. Yeah, it won't have good armor. So it'll be sneaky, big guns, probably fast, consumables. Who knows?
But that's not really that important. That's not important though. What's really important is, will it have the same gun sound as Shikishima?
Well, yeah, obviously, most important question by far. It's not a bad looking ship. It's.
I don't know. I feel like the turrets in the front are a bit oversized. It looks a bit. There's just like 2 big guns for this ship, I think, in the front.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm waiting for monitors.
Oh, you mean like the coastal bombardment? Like, was it the Lord Clive class and whatever other ones they had?
I mean, basically take a Petropavlovsk, put a giant turret on it, so it sits even lower in the water. Perfection.
See, I suggested that the Petra should become like a class ship and be allowed to dive like a submarine. Because it already looks like one anyway.
that would be a great idea. Except I'll say one thing though. It can't resurface.
Well, no, I mean, you want to talk about, like, they could do a modernized Novgorod, as in that entirely round Russian monitor from the 1870s. It would be a hell of a, like, I don't even know how you would do that, but I can see Wargaming pulling that out with some ridiculous paper thing.
I think we're not gonna see a ship like that. Just
probably
because
not really, but I don't know.
No, I think the reason we're not gonna see it is because it kind of breaks the illusion of, well. So one of the coolest things about World of Warships is the fact that the ships feel like they have mass. When you sail, you start turning. It takes a while to turn. The ship keeps going in the direction it's been going. Stuff like that. That's really cool, and it makes the game feel different from something like a first-person shooter where you just stop moving in a direction, you're instantly stop, and no problems. So the prediction mechanic works well on that. But the seas in World of Warships don't really work like seas. There are no currents, there's no real drift or anything like that. And I think a ship that's really round, it would probably have lots of problems dealing with the water in real life, right?
I mean, yeah, it
and
didn't
so
work well.
In
really
the game, it would probably feel a lot like a UFO or something.
Give them a few years and it won't stop.
It was not a successful concept. Yeah, the chat's pointed out we already have done the circular BBs. They're called the USS of Vermont. Not quite circular, but not far off. So I mean, honestly, the fact that we have this Royal Navy, tier 10 battlecruiser, the fact we've got Repulse being in testing at the moment, I was honestly kind of surprised that they went to HMS Belfast and didn't announce a Royal Navy battlecruiser line. Instead, we got a German battlecruiser line instead. So yeah, I don't know, wargaming logic, but I guess it shows that we will definitely get Royal Navy battlecruisers at some point.
I feel like that they usually want to prepare something Germanish for Gamescom. Not that I think Gamescom is happening this year, but they plan like those ship lines a long time ahead. So maybe they thought like maybe this summer there will be Gamescom again, so we want like a German line, and they just chose the Belfast event to announce it. Reason it didn't seem like very well organized because, as we pointed out, like they didn't pay people to go there and forbid them to actually show what they were shown. So it's probably just like thrown together quickly because, hey, we have this new line. How do we announce them? I don't know. Let's just combine it with Belfast.
If I can make a few wishes for the Royal Navy battlecruiser line, I would like the HMS Hood at tier 8 with slightly more AP pen. Don't need to change anything else. Everything else I don't really care about. Just keep it as same as the Hood as possible. And I'd be very happy.
Well, I mean, they're not planned to build more of the Admiral class. I can't remember. I'm sure I'm sure there were paper variations or whatever. They were going to build 4 of them. So yeah, there's probably scope for a tier 8 Hood with some not huge differences. Hood's armor, I mean, if you make the Baron's stern armor up to tier 8 levels, Hood's armor is actually already pretty decent for tier 7. It's one of the more survivable tier 7 battleships.
Yes.
So I would definitely be down for seeing a tier 8 Hood.
So for those who don't know, the Hood has better autobounce angles than... Well, it has autobounce angles that are basically the equivalent of a Des Moines. Or, I guess, a Stalingrad. And the only other battleship that has this capability is the Duke of York. But Duke of York is 356, Hood is 380, which means that when you face 25 millimeters of armor, and a cruisers like that, it ends up being incredibly scary. It's just that Hood has pretty mediocre AP penetration. The other point is that Hood's concealment at 14.1 is also lackluster. So I am wishing for a tier 8 Hood so I get the concealment upgrade so I can get to 12.7 kilometer concealment. Then I take the brisk ability that's coming with the new changes. So my ship goes like 37 or 36 knots. And then I get these amazing autobounce angles and amazing penetration. And yeah, we're never going to actually get that, right? Because that sounds a bit too strong.
But you can dream.
Yes.
But you also have neatly transitioned us to the new captain scale changes.
Yes. Well done, Aerroon. Well done.
Secondary buffs! Yay! Well, maybe.
Kind of.
I mean, it's an interesting... I mean, the secondary buff... They have moved the reload time from the... I think right now that skill that buffs your main guns when you're in secondary range has better secondary reload, and I think they moved that to like the accuracy skill. And then the accuracy only gives a very small flat percentage, and then an increasing one the longer you shoot on same target with secondaries.
Yes, right now, close quarters combat is the skill which... If something is within your secondary range, you get minus 10% main battery reload. But it also comes with minus 10% secondary battery reload. So when you get... but now they move the secondary battery effect to the secondary skill that improves dispersion.
And that the biggest thing overall is it's making secondary builds cheaper.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. If you go for pure secondaries or mostly secondaries rather than trying to buff your main guns, then it would be a cheaper secondary build. The other point is that the secondary dispersion gets better the longer the guns fire. Secondary guns, that is. Which is, I guess, a little bit like the effect from Grand Battles, where on the Hanova, but instead of main guns firing, it's the secondaries that fire. And so I think that's actually a really cool concept. It means that the destroyer that just pops up won't suddenly be obliterated by the secondaries. But at the same time, when you end up in a situation where your secondaries just go wild on that battleship or cruiser, the damage will start adding up really quickly because the secondaries will actually start hitting.
Do you wonder what it's going to do to the is it Massachusetts and the already best in game American secondary battleships are going to benefit hugely from this?
I mean, actually wonder whether you want to take that.
Yeah,
because those secondaries have 21 millimeters of pen, and if they become laser accurate, they're gonna hit that main belt really hard and deal literally zero damage.
Yeah.
I mean, the US secondaries, in my opinion, are pretty... in my personal opinion, right now, the only secondaries that work are Germans and the Key. Technically, I guess a Shikishima, but I wouldn't do that to a Shikishima because the armor profile of the ship and the whole hull is just not built for brawling. But if you're not a German or a Key and you build secondaries, you're just fucked anyway. Because they all don't get the pen to do shit.
I agree. I think if you build them for secondaries, you don't really go full secondaries, but you instead go for close quarters combat. So the idea is to just give yourself secondary range so that you get better main battery reload.
Oh yeah. It's like sad because with the IFHE nerf, right, they removed the thresholds. Like if the US could get to 27, which is what you want for cruisers, and since the IFHE nerf, they couldn't do that. The US still had pretty accurate secondaries, so at least they were relatively effective against destroyers. But with the nerf, with the captain skill, so the US secondaries now work against nothing. And I think the French, like the République, with IFHE, you can get the higher caliber ones to 31 and the lower caliber ones to 26. So, your lowers fail to pen anything and your uppers only pen, cruisers. So the French shards aren't that great for secondaries anyway. They just have the range. So you're basically stuck.
Actually, I would say that if the French secondaries weren't made of glass, it might actually be worth its while because they have a really high fire chance. But the secondaries just die immediately to everything. Even when you take the auxiliary armaments thing, which I'm not sure you always want to take, you get hit by a Conqueror and your secondaries are still just dead immediately. But Republic overall, though, feels like it's made of glass.
There was this tier 8, wasn't there this tier 8
the thing
that
is,
they
though,
introduced
those ships
a while back? Like a French, it's the last thing I tried French secondaries, I think, was a tier 8. And I don't know.
I was lagging a little bit.
Yeah,
I wanted to say that the French battleships, they synergize well with close quarters combat because the French actually get 12.5 kilometer secondary range. So you can actually make use of the skill quite often. Especially the Bourgogne. I mean, you pop reload booster with that and you get a 9.5 second reload.
True, but the problem is always that if you want to go range and range if you go range module, you give up the dispersion module. So you go 3 points for the skills, then 4 for the range skill, then 4 points for the tier 4 skill, and then maybe the module slot which gives up dispersion. So it's quite a heavy investment.
Yeah, that's true.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out in practice, though. And it'd almost be quite nice if the Battleship IFHE skill didn't have, if it had a lesser effect on reducing fire chance, if it only took fire chance down by a quarter instead of a half, for instance.
hell, I think considering it's a 4-point skill, I'm not even sure if it had any downside, whether it would be worthwhile.
Well, I mean, it's on what's 2-point skill on battleships now, IFHE. So if you were going to go that way and try and get the extra pen in your secondaries, which is probably only worth it on the German battleships?
German battleships tier 7, 8, and 9, you want IFHE. Tier 10, you don't need it. But
Okay.
yeah, the cheaper IFHE in the Germans was really nice. Like, the Germans haven't been hit so hard by the whole thing, because with IFHE, they get the pens they need. And the accuracy, they got the base accuracy buff with the captain rework, so they lost accuracy, but they lost less accuracy than others. They got cheaper IFHE, and they got more range, and synchronized now fire on both sides. So honestly, Germans were kind of fine with the captain rework, in my opinion, because I can still do, like, if I get 200 secondary hits at tier 10, I still do like 50k direct secondary damage, which is pretty decent. The problem, of course, is often getting into position where you can do that.
I recommend flying.
Or diving. The problem is I can't surface afterwards.
It is nice just to even see some, secondary skills in particular getting looked at. And there's some other, like, for the vigilance change, for instance, makes sense. Although I still don't know if it's necessarily going to be that attractive as a 2-point skill still. But yeah, one thing that would be nice is like some maybe better AA skills. We do have a change to AA gunner, but that seems to particularly be in relation to the the AA changes for the most part are to do with subs coming in.
What I really like,
depth charges and stuff like that.
What I really like is the new skill that you get less reload on repair party for each potential damage you receive. So it's something that I've suggested, I think, multiple times, that you get basically, if you go aggressive, that you get skills that give you more survivability in a sense, right? I've, for example, suggested to programming things like, if you're in secondary range, instead of getting better main gun reload, why don't you get like better reload on like a damage con or whatever, right? Now they have something that reduces repair party cooldown with more potential damage. I wouldn't be opposed if they even like added, like if you manage to get to, I don't know, 3 million potential, you get another charge on your repair party or something, like something that really rewards tanking. So I like the way they're going there.
I think the numbers are too small on the current skill. I think it should be like -1% minimum.
Little White Mouse went and did a bunch of like maths, because that's Little White Mouse, and pointed out that for a lot of ships, it's not necessarily that worth it, and it's the equal to the potential damage equal to the ship's total HP. Like was it more worth it for ships with higher hit points or lower
no
hit points?
better for lower HP ships.
Lower hit points.
So imagine the ship has 100k HP, you tank 2 million potential damage, so you get the effect 20 times. That would be 10% faster cooldown on your heal. So I don't know. I don't think it's quite really worthwhile.
Yeah,
if it were double that, maybe.
It's a bit marginal for what is it? 3 points? Yeah, for 3 captain skill points.
I mean, let's be honest. They are going to test them on the live servers, right? Those are just numbers that they have made now on paper, and once after 3 to 6 months on the live server, I'm sure they'll slightly adjust them, right?
See, but if Wargaming was really greedy, they should make all the skills OP, so people change their builds, and then they nerf it, and people change their builds again. Except, of course, the changes come with a captain reset, so it wouldn't really matter. But I really do think the minus 0.5% is a bit too little, because it's for the heal, right? If you have a lot of potential damage, you're also going to run out of your heals eventually, so even if you can use them more quickly, if you don't have any, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like as I said, I wouldn't mind if they added like, you know, you get like reduced reload, and then once you have tanked potentially like, I don't know, 20 times or 25 times the potential damage of your ship's hit points, you get an additional charge or something, right? So first it gives you better reload, but if you keep tanking, then you will also get a charge or something. I feel like that would be a nice way to upgrade this skill.
I agree on that one.
Also, something that I really need to mention is there is this new skill, right? That you get a better reload and enemy gets worse dispersion when you're on fire. This is basically, I don't know if Wargaming had watched my chat, this is the meme skill that my chat probably dreamed of, because it started with the whole, let's say, the reign of the Smolensk, and basically my Kurfürst was constantly on fire whenever I was playing it. So I decided to, instead of getting angry about it, I just said, you know, when you play a Kurfürst, you just bring a Bratwurst and then you have a barbecue on deck of your ship, right? Because you're on fire anyway. And it's gotten so far that my chat just expects my Kurfürst to be constantly on fire. And someone even like went to the official chats and tried to petition Wargaming to make a Kurfürst skin where it's just constantly on fire. And I sometimes run predictions on chat, like how often my Kurfürst is going to be set on fire in a match. And, you know, like, this is basically the meme skill I've always dreamed of. I'm not sure if it's actually going to be a good skill. For 4 points, it doesn't seem that great. But I'll just take it for the memes. I mean, that this skill is just on my Kurfürst. I mean, I can't say no to that.
Yeah, I think it'll depend on how... It's really difficult to put into words how bad, like, 20% worse dispersion is actually going to be. Because, sure, the enemies might hit you fewer times, but you'd literally have 4 fires at once. And usually you only get, like, 1 at a time, and even then it's... Nowadays, I'd say, especially at tier 10, it's not quite as often.
I mean, you don't survive 4 fires for long, and you do huge damage content. It's mostly like if you're brawling, right, maybe with another secondary ship, you might have 1 or 2 fires on you usually. I mean, that's pretty normal, right? Having at least 1 or 2 fires when you are close and fighting with something. So it's like if you have 2 fires, you basically got the same effect as with like the close quarter skill, right? And an additional the dispersion. So I would take that, I think, over the close quarters combat skill. Probably worse, but, you know, just for the memes. I feel like it might need a little buff or something. Especially for 4 points.
It kind of feels like it's a survivability skill in that it's intended as, like, well, if you're on fire that much, at least it's going to be harder for people to hit you. But, of course... people are immediately thinking about it in a way of, well, how can we weaponize this, for want of a better term? How can I utilize being on fire to be, you know,
I can tell
bastard to hit and just be on fire on purpose?
I can tell you. You play the Conqueror. Oh, 4 fires? That's okay. I'll print a new ship.
It actually is a gift to like anything with Nelson, for example, maybe even Yukon. Anything with a super heal, basically.
This is actually a topic I'd like to mention a little further. It's something I've been thinking about recently. You see, the way healing works in the game is that we're talking regular heals. When your ship takes a penetrating hit, or there are like basically 3 types of damage. There's light damage, there's like fire and flooding. Then there's penetrating damage. We're talking regular penetration hits. And then there's basically citadel damage, which are torpedo hits and basically, well, citadel hits on your ship. When you get hit by a citadel hit, you can only heal 10% of the damage on regular heals of the damage you took from the citadel hit, so torps and citadels. From penetrating hits, you can heal 50%, and on fires and flooding, you can heal absolutely everything. Ramming is also included in that. The cool thing is that the heal amounts that you could potentially heal for regular penetrating hits for most battleships are about the same amount as your ship could heal in total. But when you're talking super heals or even the enhanced heal on the old US battleship line, Montana, etc., then the ships can actually heal for more HP than regular penetrating hits can deal damage to them, even if you don't take any citadel hits. Effectively, it means that if you take something like 15,000 fire damage on something like a Montana, in the long term, your survivability isn't really affected because you can heal all of that HP up again, which you couldn't otherwise, lose into regular penetrations anyway, because you can't heal that up. And I think in this sense, fire reduction isn't quite as powerful for them. And being on fire isn't as big of a problem for ships with these kinds of heals. And I think this is something that lots of players have never really thought about.
I mean, I would say that fires for a lot of those ships are more in the bank anyway, so they aren't on fire that often in the first place. So fires for them aren't that big of a deal. I feel like fires are a lot more problematic if you are bearing the brunt of the assault. The more aggressive you are, the more problematic fires become. Also because, you need to somewhat disengage between the fires or need to get the heat off you again, or you'll just die before you can go through your heals anyway. It's this weird thing where the more passive ships can afford to take more survivability skills, but they don't really need them anyway.
Well, actually, one thing that does make me think of that would be nice to see on this list, but isn't, is if you're on fire a lot, if you're getting spammed with HE, then you tend to lose a lot of your AA mounts.
Oh yeah,
and I think I'll just look up the exact numbers. Adrenaline Rush, for your damage lost, Adrenaline Rush does actually boost your continuous AA, but it's the same flat 0.2% for all your armament. So it'd be nice if, with this list of reworked and new captain skills, that if that number was at least bumped for Adrenaline Rush for your AA damage. Or even if there was a skill that, the more of your AA mounts get knocked out, the more DPS you get from your remaining AA mounts. Something of that nature.
Why not something that starts repairing your AA mounts?
Maybe, yeah. You pop a heal and you get, X number of, well, X% of your damaged AA mounts repaired. That would be actually kind of useful on some ships, especially the new the big chunky US battleships, which are very big, slow moving HE spam targets. Or, your Grosser Kurfürst, for example.
Apparently my internet died.
It's
it still is dead, but mobile phones nowadays are pretty good.
Oh yeah, they are. So I'll come back, I guess. Or were you even back?
Thank you, I am. And to actually answer Tom McIver's question, when you're healing, does your anti-air heal in the same percentage? No, it doesn't. If your anti-air mounts go down or secondary mounts go down, they're down for the rest of the game.
Yep. Yeah, I always anytime I had this reaction when they did the last the big rework, was that it felt like there was so much more they could have done in terms of interesting synergies. One of the games I always point to when it comes to doing kind of interesting different builds is Payday 2, and the way that works with the skills split into different areas, and there are certain builds that you can make, but you can also do some sort of quite interesting sort of hybrid builds. So you can do a build that's all about body armor, or you can do a build that's all about dodging incoming fire, or builds that are about putting down a bunch of turrets, or being sneaky, or there's quite a variety, and I just feel like that's still a thing that's lacking in World Warships. a lot of ships, it's just like, well, I guess I'll take the standard survivability build.
Well, let's
It's
stop
not really
beating
a lot of
around the
viable
bush.
choices.
Let's just go straight for Path of Exile style skill trees.
You would trust
that's
the
the other-
Warships player base with them?
Sure. What could possibly go wrong?
So we've been talking
So
about
for the-
battleships a lot, but there's also a couple of other changes. Outnumbered for cruisers got better. Although there was a bit of confusion on the Discord about whether your own ship counted towards the allied ship tally.
Well, it doesn't right now. I tested it, and it doesn't right now. So if you're in a 1 versus 1 with the outnumbered skill, you get the boost right now, as in on the live server. And if what the changes say, then it seems like if you're in a 2 versus 1, you would still get the boost, but not in a 3 versus 1.
The other things are mostly anti-sub.
You know what I feel like very nice? There is like with the outnumbered skill, the last line with the changes is the bonus will also be active when there are both no enemy or allied ships within the firing range of your ship's main battery. It's so nice. If there is no enemy in your firing range, you get a bonus. That's great. That's amazing.
It actually might be quite useful because it's almost like a bonus bit of, was it dispersion or something it affects? I can't remember. But it's like, for that, if you're stealthed up and you take that first shot,
I think
presumably
there is a little bit of a problem with it, though. See, with the friendly fire changes, you can't really, create the situation yourself anymore.
That's true. That's true.
But actually, you're right. I actually completely missed that last line. This actually makes it pretty interesting for ships like the Wiemar, right?
Yeah,
with her poor concealment, getting this not poor concealment, poor main battery range, getting this kind of a bonus could be really useful to be sneakier.
I don't know if it necessarily, like the speed bonus is probably more useful than the dispersion bonus for a light cruiser, but for heavy cruisers, that dispersion bonus will be really nice. And it might actually synergize quite well. It might be a go-to pick for the fuel smoke Italian cruisers, for example. Like you have outnumbered, you pop your smoke, and if the conditions are met.
Speaking of that, why isn't outnumbered a battleship skill and brisk a cruiser skill?
Reasons.
Also, why haven't they managed yet to show up on screen when a skill is active? Games have been done for 20 years, It's not necessarily a new concept.
I mean, we literally have that with the fireworks on the captain, right? Why not have something like that? Hell, now we even have whether damage control party is active.
Yeah, I mean, you see if you are you can see if you are detected, right? You can see if enemies are aiming at you. There are things that you can see, but you can't see if your own skill is active because, with some skills, it's obvious. Like if your secondary is shoot, you can see that, but you can't really see if outnumbered is triggered right now.
I think they'd have said that's a thing that they are working on as visual indicators for when these things are active. But yeah, it's not going to be in the game when the patch hits.
Yeah, but they said they are working on this when they released the skill rework, right? We've seen nothing so far. It's been a few months.
I have a recommendation. Give us an orange square in the corner of the screen so that we actually know. It doesn't matter that it's ugly. We'd at least know.
Yeah.
Yeah, just any indicator would be useful. So I think the last one on the list, there's destroyer skills, but it's the same 2 changes to pyrotechnician and extra heavy AP. Although why they've put the depth charge bonus on extra heavy AP shells, I don't know. But yeah, hidden menace, the aircraft carrier skill, which is That was kind of the big skill rework. It was the only one that was kind of a big nerf overall, because if you wanted to have your carrier be more stealthy, which for some carriers doesn't, like the Japanese carriers, I think have got reasonably good stealth without that. But yeah, it for those that don't know, applies a 50% penalty to your returning squadron's speed.
Oh, basically, hidden menace is, well, the concealment expert skill, effectively, for aircraft carriers. But with the change, they changed it a little bit, in the sense that it also, like you mentioned, gives a 50% reduction penalty to returning aircraft. So effectively, when you're flying along and you press the F button, it takes twice as long for the aircraft to return. And the problem with this is that if there's anti-air active, the planes take twice as long to effectively fly into the sky, which means that they take twice as much anti-air damage. So taking this skill was effectively a massive nerf to your own plane survivability, or at least plane reserves. And so basically nobody would ever take this skill. So with this change, it takes 50% less time, so you're effectively in the same situation as if you hadn't taken the skill in your plane survivability. It still takes planes longer to get there, you still get better concealment, but you're just not handicapping yourself like you were before.
Yeah, it's not.
It's still a bad skill.
Training your reserves as quickly. It'd be nice if they'd just taken off that debuff. I think a lot of people scratched their heads as to why that debuff was there. But
I think it's a bad skill all around. Like, buffing your CV concealment, it's useful, obviously, but for 4 points, it's probably not even worth it if you just got the concealment buff. Because, sure, you might go, oh, but this allows me to move my CV closer to the enemy. No, it doesn't. Because if you get closer and you get spotted, you'll say, oh, but how will I get spotted? Well, I don't know. There's an enemy aircraft carrier too. Maybe she actually, flies around the map once in a while. If you try to follow behind your team and the enemy CV strikes your team, she will incidentally spot you as well. And then you get screwed over because you get spotted. And then a few of those enemy tier 10 battleships take a shot on you and you lose half your HP. And then you spend half your match at 20 kilometers from the enemy again, because that's the only place where you probably won't get popped. And because of that concealment, it's fine if you're not really paying much for it, but a 4-point skill seems like a crazy investment to me.
You know what's also interesting? That now they've announced the Russian CVs, which they describe as CVs that want to get close, not above the concealment skill, basically.
Total coincidence, I'm sure.
Definitely a coincidence.
Well, I imagine that the testers actually used the skill and were like, wow, this skill is really, really bad. Let's make it slightly less bad.
I think that's it for. I don't think there's anything else. Like we've basically talked about all the changes with the captain skills. There is one other thing on the dev blog, in that the Zeven Provinciën Tier 8 Dutch cruiser is going to be a dockyard ship with 10.7, and let's see, you can complete 21 of the 24 shipbuilding phases by completing dockyard missions. So you will have to buy 3 phases of the construction. So this isn't going to be a grind it out ship. You're going to have to pay a minimum of 4,500. And imagine they'll do some kind of bundle at the start as well, as they've done with previous ones. So, Tier 8 cruiser, and if you grind it out and you've only paid 4,500 doubloons, it's not terrible, but of course we don't know how grindy the missions are going to be exactly.
Yeah, how good the ship will be.
can you still earn doubloons somehow in the game? I mean, before you were able to earn like 2,500 per ranked season if you ranked out.
I don't
Can
know.
you still get something like that?
I don't know if ranked does. You get a small amount from like the daily logins they've done now. Towards the end of the month, I think you get a small amount of doubloons that way, but it's only quite a small amount. And the only other way I know of that you can get like 3 doubloons, as it were, is from super containers if you're lucky, or maybe some event containers will occasionally contain doubloons. I have a feeling they might have taken doubloons out of the more recent.
Ida Enrique says in
Rank
chat
mode.
that yes, you can still in rank battle.
Oh, you can. Okay.
But of course, soon there will be subs in rank battle, so enter at your own risk.
Yeah. There's also going to be for the part 2. Oh yeah, the whole thing is the part 2 event. There's going to be a special Dutch captain, Klaas Jansen, or I guess it'll be Jansen, who's going to have pyrotechnician is going to be 1.5% instead of the standard 1% extra fire chance, and the expert AA marksman skill will be plus 35% AA damage instead of 25%. That one actually might be that might be quite handy on some ships, because the Dutch cruisers they're short range AA, but it tends to at least be decent, especially the higher tiers. But it's definitely self-defense AA. Speaking
of AA, they also announced that in the next clan battle season there will be 2 carriers per team.
Yes.
7v7 and it's tier 6, so it doesn't really matter though, right? Because it's tier 6, so nobody's gonna play anyway.
I mean, nobody is going to have anti-air anyway, so why not throw more carriers in, right?
Actually, I think it's fine though, right? After all, otherwise you could just get 2 ESAs.
Well, you could, yeah, I suppose. Maybe that's why it's either no more than 2 aircraft carriers or 2 battleships. So is that? I'm actually not too clear on this. Is that like?
I think it's you can have a mix of. Or... You can have a mix of 2. You can have 2 capital ships basically.
Yeah. They've also banned the Graf Spee from taking part.
Yeah, because if they don't do that, then everyone's going to only play the Graf Spee.
I mean, I don't really do clan battles, so it's nothing that really affects me, but I'll be very curious to see the reactions of the community and what setups people run and are effective.
I was reading on the EU forum, the official EU forum, like the reaction was fairly predictable there.
Yeah, I guess.
People are not keen on the idea of coordinated cross drops from 2 carriers.
Yeah, that's actually not gonna be fun to deal with. But I've actually heard some more a little bit about it, like when players discussed on whether it would be good or bad. Double battleship might, in some cases, just be better. Especially when you take the battleships to be ESAs themselves. So you still get something like the carrier, but the main thing is that ESA has better anti-air than actual aircraft carriers. So that'll defend you from those too. And the reason why double battleship might be okay is that they tend to push the game at a faster pace than CVs will work. So it's entirely possible that by the time the CVs really kick into gear, the game is basically already decided.
I mean, I guess the question is how brutal will cross drops be? Because it's not just that 2 CVs do twice the amount of damage in that sense, but because you can stop the enemy from dodging. You can basically strike anywhere on the map and you can get a lot more damage than a single CV could. Because, and that makes it also a lot easier to hunt down destroyers. If you have really coordinated CVs, what you're gonna do against like a cross torpedo drop in your destroyer? So, I don't know. If you can, like, if your
Just
series can
dodge.
take exactly just dodge, but if your series like farm the enemy destroyers and then your destroyers like keep the enemy battleships in check, maybe that's going to work better. And there isn't going to be any radar at this tier anyway, so the planes are going to be so important against DDs, I feel like.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
There's also, well, we already knew this, but yeah, the 10.7 update's also going to bring the ranked season where we
With
get submarines. Yay!
No, you mean?
Only the tiers are real.
Really interesting. And I think
Also,
the only thing
because we get the new leagues, right? Gold League is gonna be tier 10, so it's gonna be tier 10 submarines. So I gotta farm them out. Wait, how do you even get them?
Bundles, obviously, like random bundles.
Yeah, I think they're like.
I see.
You can take part in battles on submarines which are available for rent for free from random bundle. You know, this is a very interesting wording. They're available for rent for free.
For free.
So rent
Yeah,
just basically means you lose them after the event again. For free means that the random I mean, the question is, how do the random bundles work?
It'll either be missions or it'll be some kind of something in the armory, I guess. You can bet that. I mean, even if they come with like 21-point captains, you can bet that it'll still cost doubloons to respec those captains if you make bad choices with your skills.
Oh, probably.
I didn't like submarines in the latest submarine test.
I don't think maybe
They were. I mean, submarine versus submarine combat was fun. Submarine versus anything else was please no.
But hey, if you have like 7 on a ranked team and now you put like 1 or 2 submarines per team or so, that's going to be great, right? Because then let's say you have like 2 submarines and a destroyer, and that leaves barely like any other ships left.
Well, it's a 7 versus 7, so you have 1 aircraft carrier, 2 submarines, 2 destroyers.
One cruiser, 1 battleship.
Well, no, you actually have 2 extra submarines there called Petropavlovsks.
Yes, tier 10.
I actually played a game today, or yesterday in ranked, where we had no battleships. None. So the Petros were actually the battleships.
I mean, they're used to it, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that with the like Grand Battles mode, there were less battleships. In average, I feel like there are less battleships in like random battles, because I feel like a lot of battleship players are playing Grand Battles, just wanting to get like super battleships.
I think one thing Wargaming really should have done a long time ago is they should have somehow figured out the better way to join matches. You know, right now you pick a ship and you select your game mode, and then you press the play button. And if you get a match popped, you go in there with the ship you had already selected.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be a better thing if we could somehow select the ship after we get the queue. So in that case, you could have a situation where you tick multiple boxes on the game modes that you want to queue for, and then you press the queue button, and that gives you one of the game modes that had enough players, right? And then you pick your ship. Because this would allow us to get things like grand battles and arms race and random battles all at the same time without affecting each other's queue time or screwing up things like how many battleships there are.
But then you'd have problem balancing like the ship sort, right? Like if you say, hey, I found like, I don't know, a domination game for you. And then you say, hey, okay, domination, I want to play destroyer. But what if there are not enough people pick destroyers that you can balance them on both teams? Then you'd have like, if you found a player pool first, you still need to have like the same amount of ships on, like the same amount of destroyers on both teams at the same tier, right? So that would be a problem to balance afterwards, unless you say you you can have a team that has 6 destroyers against a team that has none, right?
Well, that could be an option, right? Maybe you would pick ships basically in a way where you see what the enemy gets, or something along those lines.
Like a you could have like a League of Legends picking process or so on, I guess, where you both have teams, right? Or maybe you see what the enemy picks and you pick yourself. The problem is, can you like? It's hard to trust the player base with this, I guess, honestly.
The other point would be though that because we don't actually have skill-based matchmaking, what we could have is, say, I don't know, 6 players pick destroyers. Well, one team gets 3 destroyers, the other team gets 3 destroyers. But obviously this gets really complicated when you're dealing with things like divisions. And yeah, I agree. This is something that they'd have to really think about. But I think it's kind of inevitable that we need something like this. Otherwise, we just really can't have extra game modes. Because imagine, if on the EU server we're getting fewer battleships because of grand battles, what happens on servers where there are fewer players? Is like one of the game modes just dead?
I mean, that's why they usually don't allow you to select game modes, right? Why you can't just only queue for domination. And when they add another game mode, they just add it to the rotation. Like if they ever bring arms race, which I hope they will, then it's just you could get either domination, standard battle, arms race, or like epicenter, right? They just throw it into the pool and you can't decide. I think that's just their approach.
I agree, but grand battles, for example, are separate, right?
Yeah, but it's a time-limited event. I don't think they care about what happens over the course of a month too much.
But I mean, I think it would be cool if we could have grand battles for a longer time, but we'd have to have some kind of a system like this, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'd like... Wargaming has done a lot of cool special game modes, also like for events like April Fools or so on, or like the torpedo dodge mode we had for April Fools. That was so amazing. I also like the...
I still miss the bathtub.
Bathtub. Or even the Waterworld thing where you have 4 teams of 3 with destroyers in that cool map. Like they had a few cool things that they just brought briefly and then went again. It's sad. Because there could be so much more diversity, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we've covered about the topics you wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of camos they've announced and some flags and a bunch of new named admirals or new named captains. I don't think they're just unique portraits. I don't think there's anything special about them. Some new premium ship containers. And that's about it.
And got some changes to the Dutch cruisers we can't talk about because they're still under NDA. I mean, we could read the list, but it doesn't
we could
make any sense.
Numbers, but we can't really, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. We have once again managed to stick to our 1-hour timetable pretty well.
Oh yeah.
Wait, 1 hour timetable?
Well,
Pointy told me 1:30, 1 hour 30 minutes.
That's usually what we go for, but I think we've gone even longer this time.
Yes.
Yeah. We originally set out to create a 1 hour podcast, which we've never really managed to do. So we've already realized it's probably 1.5 hours, and then sometimes it's long.
Yeah. It's almost like we all like to hear the sound of our own voice or something. There was actually, we were going to briefly touch on the Yukon, but we could maybe leave that till next week, and then we might have some more news in that regard.
Yeah, it might even be wrapped up next week. Who knows?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's still stuff going on with that as well. So aside from we've got your YouTube up on screen. Aside from YouTube, can we find you anywhere else, Aerroon?
I sometimes also stream on Twitch. And when I say sometimes, I mean like I have like an annual stream. It's never actually meant to be annual, but it basically feels that way.
I'm afraid I missed your stream this year.
It's okay, there's always next year. But
So-
that's about it. Recently, I've been making a lot more content, especially on YouTube, and it's been going pretty well. Like, I don't know what it is, but I've been playing the Kaga recently, and it's been... I don't know how to put this into words. It's been magnificent. I don't know if Kaga is like the most broken ship I have ever played, or if it just somehow she fits me like a glove. But I've been winning so much that it just makes playing anything else and losing even that a joy, because I can always just jump into Kaga and be pretty sure I'm going to win that game.
You never really have to worry about running out plates. Is the main thing.
Yeah.
It's such a big deal in a carrier. Just if you're really throwing your planes away, you might start to have less than full groups, but compared to other carriers where you have to be a lot more careful about conserving planes. Yeah.
Well, you do run out of planes, kind of, in the sense that you try to only use torpedo bombers whenever possible, and sometimes when there's a destroyer, you would try to RNG a dive bomber onto it, but rocket planes they only exists for the fighters. You launch them, you drop a fighter on yourself, and you recall immediately because they're a waste of time. So it's possible to run out of planes, but because you only use mostly one type of plane.
I mean, I've recently gotten an AA defensive expert in my Kurfürst against the Kaga. Not that it stopped him from dropping me full squadrons until the end of the game, but it's not the medal you get often in a Kurfürst.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
All right, so that was a good one, I think.
Yeah,
Actually,
thanks for joining us.
I'd like to say one more thing. So, but this is... I hope you guys won't kill me for it. So the other day, I had an argument with my wife about how we should arrange the dining room furniture, okay? But today, when I got home, the tables were turned.
No, there it is. There it is. And on that note...
On that note, thanks for joining us, Aerroon. Thanks everyone for watching. And yeah, I guess we should rate Clyde, who has a birthday stream.
Yes, I suppose if we must.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Very welcome. It's been good having you on.
It has been fun.